Good evening, everybody. We are live now. I hand it over to Dr. Sikidar for further proceedings.
Yeah. Good evening, friends. With the permission of our Honorary President, Dr. Shinde sir, we'll start with today's proceedings. On behalf of Maharashtra Orthopedic Association, I welcome all of you for this meeting. This meeting has been organized on the occasion of 30th Foundation Day of Maharashtra Orthopedic Association. We are celebrating Foundation Week from 1st May. Maharashtra Orthopedic Association was founded on 1st May 1983 at Pune. And on Saturday, on 1st May, we have a lecture by Dr. Raman Gangakhedkar on vaccination. Yesterday, we have activity by Dr. Gade Gune on fractures around hip. And today, we have eminent speaker from Mumbai, Dr. Ishwar Gilda with us. And he will be talking on the drug therapy in the COVID-19. As you know that second wave of COVID-19 is in the full swing. And we have decided the same theme, how to stop the second wave or how to handle the second wave efficiently, and all lectures are organized according to that only. Today we have a very eminent speaker from Mumbai, Dr. Ishwar Gilda. He will be guiding us on the drug therapy, what to use, when to use, and what not to use. Today also we have IOA President Dr. Shiv Shankar sir as a guest, and past President Dr. V.M. Deshpande sir, Dr. Parag sir, and all MOA office bearers, past presidents and MOA members, and all the well-wishers who are watching this program live. I welcome once again on behalf of Maharashtra Orthopedic Association, and I request our President Dr. Ajit Shinde sir to give a welcome address about today's function. Dr. Ajit Shinde sir, please.
Thank you, Prakash. Honorary IOA President Dr. Shiv Shankar sir, today's guest speaker Dr. Ishwar Gilda, and my dear friends, good evening. On behalf of Maharashtra Orthopedic Association, I welcome you all to this wonderful webinar. As you all are aware, we are celebrating 38th MOA Foundation Week. This is our third webinar as mentioned by Prakash. We have planned activities and discussion to win over second wave of Corona, which is our theme for this year. We heard Honorary Padma Shri Dr. Raman Gangakhedkar sir on 1st May in an excellent webinar where he clarified our myths and spoke about realities of Corona vaccine. Currently, we are in middle of second wave of COVID-19 pandemic, and the current situation is horrifying. We are running out of the hospital beds and oxygen supply. This is creating havoc in not only general public, but also as a medical professional. I must admit that we are scared. If daily case count continue to rise like this, soon we will have a dire condition of the country. So in this present situation, it is very important to take precaution as well as to have a knowledge regarding treatment of COVID-19. And today we are discussing treatment of COVID-19 with renowned international virologist, Dr. Ishwar Gilda sir from Mumbai, where we can talk about what to give, when to give, and what not to give in the treatment of COVID-19. Welcome, sir. Just a bit about our organization. MOA was founded on 1st May 1983 with the vision of providing updated knowledge and skill to orthopedic surgeons from all over Maharashtra, as well as to do social services for the benefit of society. With this idea, we have selected the present activity, which will be beneficial to not only orthopedic surgeons, but all medical fraternity and ultimately to the society. Sir, presently we are more than 2,000 members. I am sure sir will guide us through the journey of COVID-19 management. Now I request our Honorary IOA President, Dr. Shiv Shankar sir, for his remarks on this activity of MOA Day Week program. And after that, Dr. Shigedar will introduce today's speaker. My best wishes to today's webinar, and I hand over the mic to Honorable IOA President Sir Dr. Shiv Shankar. Jai Hind, Jai Maharashtra, Jai IOA.
Good evening, everybody. I welcome all of you for this today's program. President Dr. Ajit Shinde, today's chief guest speaker, international famous Dr. Ishwar Gillara, past presidents of Maharashtra Orthopedic Association, whom I can see on the screen right now, Dr. V.N. Deshpande and Dr. Parag Sancheti, past secretary, Dr. Prakash Sigedar. Friends, it's a great pleasure in inviting you for this today's webinar on the management of COVID, what to do and what not to do, by the international faculty, Dr. Ishwar Gillara. I have heard his name as a medical student in 1986, when he was the first person in India to talk about HIV and to start a HIV clinic in JJ Hospital. So we have such a wonderful, internationally acclaimed speaker. So we are here to listen to him. I extend my warm greetings to all the members of Maharashtra Orthopedic Association on the 38th Formation Day, and really happy that we are celebrating in spite of this COVID pandemic in a manner through online talks by various people on this COVID situation. Thank you very much for having me here today. I hand over the proceedings to Dr. Prakash Sigedar.
Thank you very much, Shiv Shankar sir, for guiding us and enlightening us on this occasion. Now, I am going to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Ishwar Gilda sir. Is it visible now? Yeah. Dr. Ishwar Gilda, a medical doctor specialized in skin and STD with special training in HIV management in USA in 1987, is a consultant in HIV, STDs and infectious diseases at Unison Medicare and Research Center, which is India's first private sector comprehensive HIV care and infectious clinic started in 1995. He is a governing council member, International AIDS Society, President of AIDS Society of India, a professional organization of physicians in HIV care, Secretary General of People's Health Organization India. He is also Secretary General of the Organized Medicine Academic Guild, which is an association of professional medical organizations in India. He was a joint secretary of National AIDS Committee, Government of India, 1995 to 97, and advisor to the states of Goa and Uttar Pradesh from 1996 to 1999. He was the first to raise alarm against AIDS in 1985. He is known for bringing India on the AIDS control map. He has started India's first AIDS clinic in 1986 at the state-run JJ Hospital, Mumbai. He has expertise in HIV care in the resource-poor setting. He had trained several doctors, nurses, and social workers. He was editor, publisher of AIDS in Asia from 1993 to 2008. He initiated, managed, supervised, evaluated over 40 HIV/AIDS projects in India, addressed over 3,700 public meetings and training programs in India and abroad. He has 290 scientific papers at conferences, written chapters in books on AIDS STDs to his credit. He was consultant of America Foundation of AIDS Research, AMFAR, World Aid. He has more than 75 awards to his credit, including the Outstanding Young Person of the World, Glaxo in 1995, and Anna Mary Madison Award, Germany in 1999 in Munich, Germany, where he was termed as the Indian machine gun against AIDS. He has been involved with education, awareness, advocacy, and treatment of COVID-19 since beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, and his views on the analysis of COVID-19 and different scenarios have been published in several newspapers and telecasted in the several news channels. And I am proud that he is alumni of the GMC Government Medical College, Aurangabad, from where I also got trained. Sir, I welcome you on this platform of Maharashtra Orthopedic Association to deliver your talk on COVID-19 therapy, what to do and when to do. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Prakash, Dr. Shivshankar, Dr. Shinde, and my friend Vijay Deshpande. It's actually great for him to have thought of classmates or friends, whether they are eligible to speak or not. He has invited, so I really thank him. I thank also Dr. Ram Prabhu, who was former president of IOA, and he is also one of the founder members of the OMAG, Organized Medicine Academic Guild, where Indian Orthopedic Association is part of it. So basically, we are going through triple epidemics, and whether we like or we don't like, we have to be part of these pandemics. First pandemic is pandemic of COVID. Second pandemic is pandemic of webinars, because currently we cannot have conferences, so we have only webinars. And third pandemic is pandemic of guidelines. There are so many guidelines, one after another. I don't know why it is not clicking.
We are able to listen you, sir.
I need to reset, because it is not going to.
Slideshow, make it
Not
slideshow.
going there. Not moving at all. Stop sharing and then again.
Then again start. Yeah.
Done.
We can't see, sir, yet. You're not shared.
I'm sharing. I'm just sharing.
Okay.
There, because first I had to quit from there. Okay, now I can share. Okay.
Yeah.
As I
Yes.
said, we are going to have triple epidemics and we are part of them. Currently, I'm going to cover treatment of COVID, what to give, when to give, and what to avoid. But before going there, I would like to just show you the scheme, what I'm going to present. Global and national scenario, disease transmission, disease prevention, management, non-COVID illnesses, just one slide on that, managing dead bodies, and vaccine, just a passing remark on vaccine, because you already heard Dr. Raman Gangakar cover that. So if you look at the story of medicine, we go back to the Spanish flu. There are every 100 years there are major killers, but 100 years before we had a Spanish flu, and thereafter so many other problems have come, and we would like to decide now whether this pandemic is going to be bigger than Spanish flu or not. The major difference between Spanish flu management and now, that time neither there were any antibiotics or antivirals or anything, nor that time there was a vaccine. So it was just all empirical management. But now we have certain armamentarium with us, and we can manage probably better. But it's man proposes, God disposes kind of thing. We are caught up into problems now. I just compare HIV map of 2004 to 6 and COVID map of last year when we were attaining the peak. If you see that the southern 4 states, now they have become 5 states because Andhra Pradesh is divided into Andhra and Telangana. The COVID map and the HIV map, they go hand in hand. So all these problems started in the southern part, then it went to the northern part. But before they could go to northern part in a very big way, we could create such a good awareness, youth-centric policies, so that it did not go in the north in a bigger way. However, what happened with COVID was we just allowed it to happen. And probably some are man-made, some are neglect from society, people, but whatever. Currently, we can also blame the virus, and it went ahead. But currently, if you look the current map, the entire map of the country, barring Maharashtra and Chhattisgarh, is dark red. However, people all over the country or all over the world, they talk only about Maharashtra. Maharashtra currently is better than all other places. Why it is better? Okay, we are reporting 50, 60,000 cases per day. we are having close to 1,000 deaths, but we are at a plateau, or we are at a peak second time for last 1 week or 10 days, and another week or so we start going down. It's already started going down, but we need to see at least 2 weeks to see that it is really going down, because sometime at the peak it is up and down. Now, a peak is like when you are taken a flight takes 5 minutes to take off, then on a plane, and then it comes down. So when it lands, it takes minimum 20 days. So going up, it doesn't take much time, but coming down, it takes time. And there are certain dynamics on that. I don't want to get into detail, but what I would like to say that currently the entire country is a red zone. And if Government of India talks that we are going to have some issue with the 165 high risk district and have a staggered lockdown, there is going to be a wrong policy, because today's hot become tomorrow's cool, and today's cool become tomorrow's hot. Every Maharashtra initially started that if anybody coming from 5 hot states, Delhi, Kerala, Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh, will be screened at the airport. Now, who is hot now? So Maharashtra became hot and they were cool. Now Maharashtra became cool, they are becoming hot. So we cannot have this hot and cool theory. Now you look at currently Delhi cases, we are hovering around 4 lakh, 5 lakh, 4 lakh, 4 lakh. We will go up to 5 lakh. Why will not go beyond 5 lakh? Not that we will have controlled COVID, because our testing capacity is not more than 20 lakhs for Delhi. So currently we are testing around 18 lakh, 19 lakh, maybe 20 lakh, maybe 22 lakh, but it cannot go beyond that. So if you cannot go beyond that, our limitation of going up, even with 20%, 25% positivity rate, is around 5 lakhs. And if you look at currently recovered and active cases, why we are overwhelmed at hospitals, at OPDs, at home care, is because of a huge gap between those which are new infections, those which are recovered. So every day there are new infections are added in lakhs and recovery is in thousands. And that's the reason currently we have 34 lakhs, 13,642 cases, which are active cases requiring treatment. What we are discussing again is only recorded numbers. We are not discussing which are not RT-PCR positive, which are being treated at home by doctors without even testing them, or those which are having false negativity. Again, we had a peak on last year. The highest deaths were around 1,243 deaths on 15th of September. Highest number of cases were on 16th of September. But thereafter, we had a very good lull period, and particularly these 3-4 months, they were lull. And when there was a lull period, we had a lot of gatherings, we had a lot of engagement ceremonies, birthday ceremonies, marriage anniversaries, and marriages, and also cricket matches. Match of 1 lakh people in our stadium. And we had then a lot of super spreaders like Kumbh Mela, Vaishno Devi Yatra, and other super spreaders by way of elections. So we didn't bother about this, and therefore we are going to see, and we are already seeing the peak here. We are going up and up. So if you look at this, we have 3,700 deaths per day. Now what happens is, when usually internationally also they talk by number of cases per country. India being number 2 in population will be number 2 or number 3 or number 4 in many of the problems and many of the diseases. So just blaming India because it is number 1 or number 2 is a wrong thing, because our population is high. But if you see same thing per million population, either death or per million population cases, globally India is at 115 rank out of 220 countries in number of cases per million, and number of deaths we have 119 rank in 220 countries. So that way India is not bad if you compare elsewhere. But currently it is becoming suddenly a lot of cases have come, and there are new virulence of the virus, new variants of the virus, and therefore we are seeing a lot of cases. So what I had done, rather than talking Maharashtra number 1, look at per million cases, Maharashtra is number 7. Delhi, Goa is number 1, Delhi, Ladakh, Kerala, Lakshadweep and Pondicherry, they are. And if you look at district ranking, unfortunately, Nagpur is number 1, both in the rank for number of cases per million and number of deaths per million. But thereafter, in number of cases, we have Pune, Gurugram, Bangalore. Nobody talks about Bangalore. Bamatara is one of the districts in Chhattisgarh, and Leh. But when you look at the number of deaths, again, in number of cases per million, Mumbai is ranking 15 in this state, not first. Delhi is 13. But if you look at number of deaths per million, Nagpur, Mumbai, Pune, Dehradun, and Yanam. And Dehradun, I was just informally discussing, had the highest number of deaths per million, 41 per million, just one day before yesterday. The India's average currently is 2 deaths per million of COVID, 2. And Dehradun is 41. That means people are dying for want of care, for want of oxygen, for want of any medicine, for want of medical caregivers. So this is a very bad state of affairs. When you look at ranking of Delhi 6th, Kolkata 7th, Bangalore 12th, and Chennai 15th. So Kolkata and Chennai, they have come from below rank to up because of elections. Now, there are a lot of mutations occurring. Initially, we talk about the mutations coming from South Africa or Brazil or UK. And UK mutation was found here, but all other mutations, Brazil was hardly one, South Africa was hardly few, and we were not bothered about them. UK mutation has been found in the big numbers only in Punjab cases. Almost 75% of the cases were from UK mutation. But we had our own mutation in Maharashtra from Amravati, and that was E484Q and L452R. These two mutations combined and they became B1.617, and that's called double mutation, double mutant. And further, it combined with the B117 from UK, it became triple mutant, which is B1.618, and that is found in big numbers in what you call West Bengal. But now we have one more mutant, which is N440K, and that is found only from Kurnool initially. But Kurnool being in Andhra Pradesh, and Andhra Pradesh being having a border with Chhattisgarh, Maharashtra, and Karnataka, in these 4 states, 4% to 9% of the cases are found from this mutation. Now, why I'm talking about this mutation? If today we are overwhelmed just by B1617 and B1618, this new mutant is very bad. It's 10 times more infectious than previous. And the previous 2 mutations were only 2 times more infectious. So currently, just only 5 to 9% of the cases are from this mutation. But if it is 10 times more infectious, it spreads, then you can imagine what will happen. And therefore, for last couple of days, I have been advocating a total nationwide lockdown, strictest lockdown. But lockdown has become a stigmatizing word. It has become an untouchable word. Because of the previous lockdown, there were some pros and cons, and there was a lot of criticism. So government do not want to either call it lockdown or do not want to go for lockdown. So Maharashtra government also done lockdown, but they call it break the chain event. So here we are going. Now, if we are currently looking at current cases, the red zone is the current cases, and that is in April. So most cases are from B1617, so which is a double mutant. So current state, as I told, they are more lethal. They are initially what happened. I was the first person to be blamed, if at all. And we used to say that the new infection is more infectious, but less virulent and less lethal. Thereafter, we realized that last year we used to have patients with asymptomatic, and we used to say 85% people are asymptomatic or mild symptomatic. But this time, almost everybody is symptomatic. So we have removed that asymptomatic. We call 85% are mild symptomatic. Now we realize that deaths are more. In last 2 or 3 weeks, if you look at, I'll show the table also made by me. It was 1.2% case fatality rate. Case fatality rate is a number of deaths occurring today from the infected cases 2 weeks before. Because people who are dying today, they are not dying from today's cases or yesterday's cases. They are dying from those who are infected 2 weeks before. And people infected today, from them, about 99, 95%, 96% will recover. Other will die and become critically after 2 weeks. So basically that 2 week lag is there. That 1.2% within 3 weeks has become 1.8%. So 50% more deaths, either because it is highly lethal virus or because they are dying of oxygen supply and some supplies which are not there for the treatment. So when you look at new strains, what has changed? Last year we have not seen a lot of signs and symptoms which are seeing this time. We have never seen conjunctivitis. We hardly seen any diarrhea. We hardly seen other skin patches, etc. We have not seen much of headache. This time everything is seen, and there are new strains and new symptomatology. So as I was telling you, if you look at the first week, first to 7, we had lost only 390, total country in a week lost only 32 people. Yesterday we lost 3,700 people in one day. So you can imagine that within 7 days it has become 7 times. So then it became 6,261. It was 59% change, and it became 1.4%. Next week it became 1.6%, 11,519, and 22 to 28, 20,148 cases. So it has become 1.8. Today, and as I told you, CFR is calculated minus 14 days cases. So from minus 14 days, it is calculated like that. But if you see now, the deaths are at least in the range of 3,500 to 4,000. So in a week, we'll have around 25 to 26,000 deaths, which will be another 25% plus in 20% or 20,000. So you can imagine that CFR is going to go up again. CFR in Maharashtra, it was 1%, it became 0.9%, 0.9%, it became 1.3%. So in just 2 weeks, Maharashtra was 44 plus. Fortunately, Mumbai is constant at 0.7, 0.7, 0.7. So my analogy is that Mumbai has a proper medical supply or oxygen supply or hospital bed allocation because of ward war zones. They called ward war rooms, and from every ward they were allocating beds, and they were calling each positive person, inquiring what is their oxygen level, sending ambulance from that level to the that home of that person, inquiring whether the person can be home isolated, whether there is bathroom available or not. So all these things made the graph static for death. And that's the reason what I say that the extra deaths are from oxygen shortage. Otherwise, everything is the same. What treatment protocol is being used in Mumbai, same pan-India, maybe plus minus 5-10% here and there. So major deaths are occurring because of want of medical treatment and oxygen supply. So what happens when you do a lockdown? India had earliest, strictest, longest lockdown. And at that time, on 24th of March, we had only 532 cases pan-India. Today, 532 cases are there in one lane or one society. So when we did lockdown, and after unlock, cases were increasing because medically, that was not the time for lockdown. If you look at Spain, Germany, Italy, and UK, they locked down when the cases were going up. When they unlocked, the cases remained low. So all over the world, it happened like that. They had seen second wave or third wave, but their second wave may have been due to mutation, may have been very lax attitude, like in UK or in USA, they were not listening to any law, like we see in many places in our country also. So my next part is disease transmission and disease prevention. So if we look at, it's time to address airborne transmission. There are anecdotal cases where mother and daughter both are locked in home. They have not stepped out in last 6 months. They had not gone anywhere. No relative had come to them. Some food supply was coming, but food supply was kept outside the door, and they were sanitizing and taking it, and they got infection. How did they get? So possibility of airborne transmission from a first floor or ground floor in the second floor building, it may happen. So even if we say you keep windows open, keep the fan fast, so keeping window open, that may have given entry to airborne. That's the reason that issue came about double masking or masking with a particular mask, etc. had come. So when we sit, I'll show you another graphic where we sit idle, nothing happens. When we don't open the mouth, the problem is we open the mouth, the transmission from us to others and others to us, it can come. While talking, it is 1,000 times more droplets. By coughing, 3,000 times, and by sneezing, 40,000 times. So by sitting, 0, and then 1,000, 3,000, 40,000. And therefore, in home also we say we should have a cross ventilation, we should have adequate ventilation, and in the clinic also we say rather than sitting at 180 degree with the patient, sit at 90 degree or 135 degree, so that when patient is talking, his air is going somewhere else, and when you are talking, your air is going somewhere else. So it's not going on direct face to face. Now, when you look at how effective are face masks, basically, if no mask is there, very high risk for both. When you are using a face mask, then for you it is medium risk because it can filter some. When you are using a mask, the other person is using a mask, you are not using, you are at low risk because his filtration will stop there with which the speed with which it is coming. And when it is the person is both are using mask, then it is a low risk. But when you are both are using mask and you are in distance by 2 meters, then zero risk. And therefore, Do Gaj Ki Duri, the title came because of this Do Gaj Ki Duri. Now, there are COVID personalities, and that personality trait has been seen. There are people who deny science. They said there is nothing like science. You hear some dissenters, right from our HIV days, we are hearing that there is nothing like HIV, there is nothing like virus. These are created by doctors and pharma companies to make people money, and same thing was done for COVID. So the deny science. Then some people believe in magic. Some magic will come and will be fine. Some people listen to people, but they do not understand science. So they wear mask, but while talking they remove mask. While breathing they put the mask below nose. And there are people who believe science. So unfortunately, this group is only 20-25%. However, 25% that and 25% that, 50% are the responsible people. Other 50% are totally irresponsible. And that's what has been also seen by some of my surveys done at the Worli Walkway, that when I went for walk, I seen only 40% people which are from a health conscious category, highly rich category, highly young people, and they are wearing only 40% of their mask. Out of which half of them are wearing mask as a tie or hanging in the hand or below the nose. So, or one year they're putting mask and the mask is hanging. So that is no way of using mask. And initially, you must have seen last year, people have had used Huggies for masks, bags and katori and any food. So all this kind of thing we have seen in India. Now, how to wear mask again? It has to be properly worn. It has to be fit test. So N95. Therefore, we say N95 because N95 is a clip. Some other masks also have clip. Surgical mask also has a clip. It should cover from nose to the total chin fully, and there should not be any possibility of going air. And those who are wearing a spec, they can also test by when you are talking, when you are somewhere. If the air comes here, your what you call spec will be fogged. So that is some leakage, and that's the reason that when you wear double mask, then the chances of fitting is proper, and therefore we are saying double mask. Otherwise, what is happening currently is like income tax. Those who are paying income tax, they are asked to pay cess, education cess, COVID cess, all cess. Those who are not paying, they are not brought under income tax ambit. So currently, Niti Aayog issued a guideline last week that we should use mask also at home with the wife, with the mother, with everybody. But they are not asking those people who are not using mask. So our job and duty to see that 50% unmasked population should be first masked. And then we talk about the quality of mask, double masking, masking at home, masking in bedroom. So that will come later. So as I told you, the mask can be double, where their fitness can be checked. And if you are using cloth mask, because in India, we have seen so many types of masks which are not seen anywhere in the world. Designer mask, engagement mask, marriage anniversary mask, wedding mask, with the booty mask, and all these things miss the mask color and the batwa color is the same. So even if you want to do that, it should be triple layer, 100% inner layer, which is cotton, then middle layer, which is a fused non-woven filter, and outer layer is a soft breathable polyester, and then it can properly filter air and we can stop the particle. Now, why COVID-19 is spreading fast? Because what happens that we wear masks with unknown people, and for unknown people, say we are standing at a bus stand or going on a train, we have masks. But with known people, with family members, with our office mates, with classmates, we open masks and we stop sometimes having jokes, discussion, etc. And that's the time we exchange viruses. And whether it's eating, quiet, talking, speaking. So all this time, we think that अरे ये तो हमारा दोस्त है, उसको क्या है, वो भी वही से प्रिकॉशन लेता हूँ, जैसे मैं लेता हूँ, and that's the way it has been spreading. So when you look at this thing, if the person is silent and not even wearing a mask, outdoor ventilated, indoor ventilated, poorly ventilated, outdoors well ventilated, high occupancy area, and indoor well ventilated, he will not get or she will not get the infection. And poorly ventilated can still get it. Wearing face covering. Then speaking again up to last. So long as you are having a face covering in all these areas, you are safe. But shouting, again, in poorly ventilated and in this area, we can be what you call yellow, and then you become red. But wearing face covering, contact with a prolonged time, if you're spending days, like in the office, full time, or people in bank, etc., for dealing with a lot of clients, full time. So they can be still some risk there. But so long as they are silent, they are not speaking, they can be in a green zone. But when no face covering is there, then if you are silent, then fine, up to here. Thereafter, there is a risk. So the benefit of mask, whether you are silent or speaking or shouting, it is enormous. Coming to management and testing and treatment. So basically, we must have preparedness for hospital, which is called triaging, isolation, whether standard, contact, and airborne precaution, as well as personal protective equipment or PPE, they call, for healthcare workers. Decide where to treat and diagnose and other tests and initiate treatment. So nowadays the new term, which is an older term actually, but called triaging, and it is very well used to decide where the person should be treated, at home, in COVID care facility, in outpatient facility, or inpatient facility. In inpatient, where in inpatient, whether just an oxygen bed or ICU or ventilator. So when you look at the triangle or pyramid, out of 1,000 people who are infected, only 1,000 come to your knowledge. So for every infected person which is recorded, there are 10 infected in society and they are not recorded. So we'll not discuss the remaining area. We'll talk only about registered area. Now, out of those, almost 80 to 85% are mild cases. They get up and up, and when they start getting some problem. But 14% can get severe cases. In mild also, there can be some possibility of pneumonia. So you do CT scan, you will always find some changes, and people start diagnosing based on CT scan and asking them to get hospitalized based on CT scan. So whether at home or in hospital, what are the complications? Pneumonia. Almost 91% people get pneumonia. They get critically ill. ARDS is one of the highest problem in the critically ill people. Shock or septic shock, acute kidney injury or renal failure, or acute hepatic injury or cardiac abnormalities. So acute cardiac injury, cardiomyopathy, and arrhythmias. And people are dying of cardiac arrest or arrhythmias, and hospital-acquired infection or ventilator-acquired pneumonia. So what we do at home, we ask people to be prone. And when they are prone, the oxygen level increases. Sometimes it increases by almost 70%. So we ask people to be prone either on left side or right side, or sleep on chest or abdomen, and sit in a supine position, prone position, and sit with a backrest. Then there are oxygen concentrators. They can be used at home. So either you get oxygen cylinder or you can get oxygen concentrator. Oxygen concentrator can supply oxygen from 2 to 10 liter per minute. It has been in use for a long time for COPD patient, bronchial asthma patient, and it is a very good handy device, those who can afford. But somehow the oxygen concentrator, which are costing 30,000 or so, they have become skyrocketed to 1.5 lakhs now. Now, in extrapulmonary manifestation, initially people thought because this is a respiratory infection, it will only affect lungs. But if you take any organ, there is a neurologic, there's a headache, dizziness, encephalopathy, Guillain-Barré syndrome, myalgia, anosmia, stroke. Almost every alternate person gets anosmia, loss of taste, agresia. Then dermatologic, the petechiae or petechial hemorrhages, urticaria, vesicles, pernio-like lesions, erythematous rash, or livedo reticularis. In cardiac, we can a lot of cardiac conditions are there. So thromboembolism, hepatic, renal, endocrine, and gastrointestinal. So almost internal, all organs get involved and sometimes it's a multi-organ failure. So predictors of mortality among COVID-19 patients are whether the person is below 50, 50 to 59, then 60 to 69, 70 to 79, 80 plus, and what are the comorbidities. So they will decide how people will survive or die. So the studies which were done in the first part of the pandemic that showed that 88% of the deaths were among 45 plus people. And among them, those male were more death than female, possibly male were more outgoing or female have better immunity. And that's the reason precisely Government of India decided to immunize 60 plus people and 45 with comorbidity and entirely with 45 plus people. And that was a decision taken after this study of 1st April 2021 that all 45 plus should be given vaccine. Again, some consideration. When do we test? When does a person get symptom? So what happens is during the first week, if you do the test at that time, before that in the minus 8 days or 10 days when the person could be incubating, that time testing will not result in anything. But after you get symptom, even from 1 day or 2 day minus symptom or to the symptom, you can get RT-PCR positive. Thereafter, you can get antigen test positive. And after 1 week or so, you can get antibody positive. Antibody can be IgM or IgG. IgM comes first and IgG comes later. IgM will be there only for 2-3 weeks or so, but IgG may stay for months and months. So we are now seeing those which are IgG positive in July or August last year, their antibodies are vanishing. I am talking about a spot test. I am not talking about ELISA. And they started getting second time infection. So reinfection is possible when IgG bands are not there. So the tests are molecular, that is RT-PCR, and RT-PCR is a known technology even from the HIV days or hepatitis B days, and that time we used to call only PCR and viral load because we were doing qualitative and quantitative both. But now there is only qualitative to find out whether positive or not. However, some people started going by CT value. CT value is if it is high, virus is low. If it is low, virus is high. But there is no calibration because when you look at the PCR in blood, you know you are looking at 1 ml of plasma. So you can say that how many copies per ml of plasma. Here, it is all objective, subjective both. Whether the person has collected from nose or throat or both nostril, or whether he rotated the swab properly or not, whether at that time the person already had cleaned the nose or not. So all those parameters are there. So that is not standardized to have quantification. It can have only qualitative, and that cycle threshold will decide in 1 or 2 cycles it picked up, virus is high, and in 31 it picked up, virus is low. But you cannot say gradation based on that CT or cycle threshold. Then antigen test. In RT-PCR, though it's the gold standard, is 100% specific. Positive is positive, but negative is 30% false negative. So even if the person is already incubating the virus, having the clinical symptomatology, but still can test negative, and that is a false sense of security we will consider as a surgeon, as an orthopedic surgeon. You feel that you are operating on somebody who is RT-PCR negative, but that person will not be negative. Antigen test gives 50 to 60% false negative. So again, antigen positivity is very good specificity, but negativity is a lot of false negativity. Antibody test is a very good sensitive test. When you get antibody band positive, that means particularly IgG, that means person was definitely infected in the past. We have not seen much of cross reactivity. Secondly, for a surgeon's population or for those which are obstetric gynecologists or who are doing dialysis, for them antibody test is very good. If person is already antibody positive, you don't have to bother about RT-PCR at all. So use of antibody assays can be for community to understand disease dynamics, which they are doing a sentinel surveillance, and to safely bring back realm of normal life. We can tell people now you are normal, you can go around. Still, by law, by any kind of ethical guideline, you should use mask. But otherwise, you are already infected. You will not get infected so easily. You will not infect somebody else. So individual with antibodies assumed to be less susceptible to reinfection, limited possibility of spreading the virus, may safely return to normalcy, back to work, etc. So in a medical healthcare setting, particularly say for us also, when IAS or after the lockdown IAS came, people talked about RT-PCR. We said, no, let us do antibody test. Antibody positive, take her for job immediately, without any quarantine. And fortunately, first, second, third, all were coming positive. So antibody positivity was so high, and therefore the theory of the herd immunity fails here. That if so many people were infected that time, why we are getting the second wave, which is such a bigger wave? And then is important consideration for healthcare workers, as I told you, could be spared from quarantine in the near future if guidelines they change, and immune passport. So those which are already vaccinated twice and have already passed 2 weeks, or those which are already infected with RT-PCR positivity in just 15 days before or so. And thirdly, those which are antibody positive, they can get that immune passport. For individual, like in America, they started asking people not to use mask if you are already been vaccinated with 2 doses and 2 weeks before. For individuals to know previous illness as a screening tool, plasma donation, surgeons, OBGYN dialysis, as I already told you. Laboratory abnormalities in severe diseases. So basically, all the people who have lymphocyte going down, neutrophil going up, alanine aminotransferases and aspirated aminotransferase levels will be up. Lactate dehydrogenase LDH will be up. PCT will be up. CRP will be up. Ferritin will be up. And serum levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines and chemokines will be up. So evidence of immune dysregulation, higher plasma levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines like TNA alpha or IL-1 or IL-6 and chemokine IL-8 in severe and critically ill patients versus less severely ill patients. So these kind of markers are done only in the admitted patients, which are moderate or severely ill, and associated with mortality if it is a high D-dimers and lymphopenia. These are the latest guidelines which are endorsed by ICMR, Government of India, and AIMS. I just amplified it to understand what is to be done for mild, what is done for the moderate, what is to be done for the severe disease. For the mild, as I told you, 85% people will be mild. You have to just have tell them they could be just upper respiratory tract infection, little bit cough, little bit fever, body ache, and some hypoxia may be there. So what we tell such people, that see that your oxygen at rest and oxygen after 6 minutes of walk remains 94 plus. When it goes to below 94 up to 90, then it becomes moderate, and below 90 it goes to severe. Again, respiratory rate has to be checked. If it is more than 24, it goes to moderate, and it is more than 30, it goes to severe. In the mild cases, home isolation. Now, what happened? Because the guidelines are not very clear, those who are infected in the current pandemic, at least the current second wave, once somebody is positive at home, almost everybody is infected. So in such situation, asking them to stay in separate room, it is not possible. That many rooms are not there with many people. So we can say those who are infected stay in one room, those who are not infected stay in another room. And one of my patients developed a very good colloquial terminology, saying that, sir, should I room quarantine or home quarantine? So if we in room quarantine or home quarantine, if everybody is infected, home quarantine. If he is infected, room quarantine. And what are to be done most is a physical exercise, physical distancing, stay indoor, at least 10 days, minimum 10 days from the first sign of symptom or first sign or symptom they develop, and maintain good oxygen level. I think I have another slide to show. They may have flu-like syndrome, they have fever, they have some cough, and usually it goes on for 7 to 10 days. So what they should do, separate room and bathroom if possible, good rest, hydration and nutrition. So ask them to take very good hydration, because they feel dehydrated, and water also has H2O, so some extra oxygen can be there from water. Antibiotics like paracetamol, antihistaminic or decongestant, pain relievers as needed. So all are SOS. Any other medication only by prescription. Strict hygiene and disinfection, monitor O2 saturation and watch for worsening signs. For how long to stay at home? So it can be 7 to 10 days, and after 10 days, after birth or after death of somebody, we say 10th or 12th, you take a bath and now you are free. So like that situation is there also in COVID. So symptom-based strategy, more than 24 hours since resolution of fever, last antibiotic. So without antibiotic, if they have no fever, then they are free. And improvement in symptom and more than 10 days since symptom, whichever is earlier. However, the official guideline says it should be SARS-CoV RNA negative. But there are people, even after 10 days or 15 days, they will be RNA positive. When RNA positive, that doesn't mean that person is shedding the virus. Person is uninfectious. But the guideline says so, therefore, for discharge, etc., they have now changed a guideline. They are discharging on 10 days without even RT-PCR because there's a shortage of RT-PCR. But by and large, those guidelines were there, and there are other practical guidelines which are more handy to us and useful to us. Now going to the shortness of breath, and those who have more than 30 respiratory rate and SpO2 is less or equal to 93. So we need to stagger the stage 1 early infection, stage 2 pulmonary phase, stage 3 hyperinflammation phase. And during this period, we need to decide when to give remdesivir if at all, when to give dexamethasone if at all, and when to give oxygen. And as I told you, up to 94, oxygen is not required. 94 to 91, home isolation, and we can ask them to take oxygen at home with oxygen concentrator or oxygen cylinder. But beyond that, shift them to hospital. In a hospital setting, clinical management is a supportive care of complication. Remember, there is no perfect anti-COVID drug, no perfect antiviral for COVID. Oxygenation, non-rebreather mask, prone position, hydration, a role of remdesivir and corticosteroid, which I'll again emphasize when the turn comes about 1 or 2 slides later. No proven benefit for COVID-19, whether lopinavir, ritonavir, or oseltamivir, Fabiplu, they are using it, or other antimicrobials like ivermectin, doxycycline, or other drugs, which are n number. There are people coming with 20 or 15 drugs on one page, and they have been taking all. And sometimes they come, sir, I got COVID symptom, I got diarrhea, I got this, got upset. They get diarrhea because of CADA, diarrhea is because of a lot of drugs they are taking. And weak evidence for favipiravir for mild and moderate cases. Corticosteroid, there's a recovery trial which clearly proves that corticosteroid has been very much handy, and it is, if you check mortality at 28 days, it has markedly reduced mortality, and those who have been treated corticosteroids, they had a lower mortality. Vitamin D has a role where vitamin D deficiency is there because people have been at home, there's no exposure to light, they are not going for morning walk, they are not going for exercises. So vitamin D deficiency, and that has a definite role, but there is no role for bolus vitamin D. So it's a general preventive effect of vitamin D supplementation against ARI was observed. The effect was greater in those with vitamin D deficiency, which is less than 25 international units, and if the supplement was given daily or weekly, but not as a bolus. So what is no benefit? Ivermectin, no benefit. Doxycycline, no benefit. Azithromycin, no benefit. Antibiotics, no benefit. So I'll show you how they don't benefit and who are benefited. Steroids, yes, 100% benefit. Then what may benefit? Vitamin D, other vitamins like vitamin C, B complex, and paracetamol and inhalers. And inhalers, there are new studies which have come. Budesonide helps people overcome oxygen shortage. So when you look at remdesivir, it may be considered only in patients, and these are the WHO, these are the Government of India recent guideline of 21st of April. So only in patients with moderate to severe requiring supplemental oxygen. So only those who require oxygen, they will require remdesivir. No renal or no hepatic dysfunction. So eGFR should be less than 30, and where there is no absolute contraindication, who are within 10 days of onset of symptoms. So after 10 days, it is useless. Recommended dose is 200 milligram on first day and 100 milligram daily for next 4 days. Not to be used in patients who are not on oxygen support or in home setting. So that's the reason that home setting it is not given. Tocilizumab is off-label. It is used for rheumatoid arthritis, but it has been used to bring down the cytokine storm. So may be considered when all of the below criteria are met. Presence of severe disease, preferably within 24 to 48 hours of onset of severe degree of the disease. Significantly raised inflammatory markers like CRP and IL-6, not improving despite use of steroids, no active bacterial fungal tuberculosis infection, recommended single dose of 4 to 6 milligram in a 60 kg person, 400 milligram is required, and that is 100 milligram, 100 ml normal saline over 1 hour. A lot of people have been also using second tocilizumab. I have seen several people, several deaths because of second tocilizumab. So first tocilizumab also gets a lot of infections, second infections because of suddenly immunity goes down. But with second, there are lots and lots of fungal infection. Mucormycosis is seen also. Convergent plasma therapy. So may be considered only when following criteria are met: early moderate disease, preferably within 7 days of symptom onset, no use after 7 days at all. So you can imagine no use of plasma after 7 days, no use of remdesivir after 7 days. And tocilizumab can be used only after 7 days and when all other parameters are met and when CRP and IL-6 is high. Availability of high titer donor plasma. Now the problem comes here. We don't have the titer test at all, which are seeing neutralizing antibodies. And international guidelines says only if you have the titer of more than 1,000, then only the plasma therapy will be useful from the donor. Otherwise, it will not be useful. But here, whatever, firstly, only spot tests are available. ELISA tests are very minusculely available. If they are available, they are very few of them having neutralizing antibodies. And if at all they are available, I have not seen anybody with 1,000 mark. They're all 300, 400, 500, from 50 to 500. So I don't know what is the role of plasma therapy, whether it is going to be useful or not. So Dr. Bhavin Jankaria, who is a famous radiologist from Mumbai, he has made a very good graphic. He said one is a low cost, one is a high cost. The low cost is a paracetamol, check fever, check O2. In that also 95% improve. In high cost, there are minimum 10 drugs, a minimum 10 tests, including CT scan. And again, recovery rate in them also is 95%. So we do not know whether we should have a low cost or high cost, but there is also VIP syndrome. There is also a syndrome for doctors. There is syndrome for politicians. And therefore, we are under pressure to use a lot of fancy drugs. Now coming to non-COVID illnesses. What has happened? Because of COVID, focus on COVID, there are a lot of non-COVID people are dying. And those studies are done in 3-4 other countries, Germany, UK, Italy, and United States. How they studied? Suppose in 2019, in a particular place, 10,000 people died. And 2020, 20,000 died. But recorded deaths of COVID are only 4,000. So there are 6,000 extra deaths. How are they dying? Whether 6,000 extra deaths, some of them are COVID, not classified as COVID because RT-PCR was not done, or there are some comorbidities dying for want of care or neglected by doctors or healthcare centers because everywhere is only COVID. And therefore, they found that many places there are non-COVID damages going on. And same thing has happened here, where 95,000 additional deaths have occurred in India because of tuberculosis last year. And this is also 50% reduction in TB cases detected and successfully treated. And there are a lot of either detection is poor, treatment is late, and people are dying for neglect because ventilators are not available, other ICU care is not available. Managing dead bodies, again, very important concept. And here I would like to squarely blame our great ICMR body, Indian Council of Medical Research. They did a similar mistake in 1986 when they issued the first guideline how to dispose of dead bodies of HIV positive people. And they said that HIV positive person's dead body should be sealed in a double impervious bag, polythene bags, sprinkled with sodium hypochlorite, body to be taken from hospital or place of death to crematorium straight. Don't take home. Don't do last rite. And so many things were spread in the society that despite 10, 15 circulars thereafter, which shows that the previous circular was wrong, people follow the same guideline. People are scared of dead body of HIV positive person. Same thing happened in COVID. COVID, they issued guideline that COVID person dead body should be in a COVID specific bag. You close the bag and dispose of the dead body as early as possible with minimum possible people. We fail to understand when COVID is spread through cough or sneeze, dead body doesn't cough, doesn't sneeze. How dead body doesn't sing, dead body doesn't speak. So how do you get COVID from there? And therefore, all those protocols, Twitter handle that you isolate people and they put some remark that containment zone or people were discredited because of death, they were all had to change after we added some campaign. So families can hold funeral, which is the WHO now, says WHO in its new guideline for managing dead bodies during the pandemic. See, if you go by, I'm not sure about what are the familial practices in other communities, but in Hindu community, we give a nice bath to the dead body. We give a new cloth. We plug the air hole, eyes are closed, ear and nose are plugged, mouth is plugged or gagged, so that any kind of secretion will not come out. We do 3rd, 10th and 12th, so that all incubation periods are covered. And all those 10, 12 days of mourning are what you call quarantine. But nowadays we just hug each other, we meet people, but the traditional way of mourning was in the person's home where somebody died, they are sitting separately and other people are sitting separately at a distance of 2 gaj ki duri. And that was the initial guideline, and same thing should be followed now also. So infection prevention and control, management of dead body, again the WHO guideline which I told you, 4 September 2020. But still people have been ill-treated. And I called a slogan, Jalana ho ya dafnana, insaniyat ko mat bhulana. The families and people who were ill-treated so badly, the dead bodies were cremated or the funeral was done by somebody who are not even known. They're called COVID warriors or COVID warriors. So it is such a wrong situation. So basically what I wanted to say in English was, it is a burial or funeral, humanity is essential. Lastly, vaccine. I will just pass within 2 minutes because vaccine has been already covered. There are so many stages because you are reading every day, vaccine shortage, vaccine shortage. Shortage can be anywhere. Shortage can be from manufacturer to the cold chain management, to the responsibility where it is there, to the vaccine storage facility, to the administrator. So it can be anywhere. And Covishield and Covaxin, if you are given a choice, again, nothing is plus minus. Whatever you are getting, you take it. But Covaxin has less adverse effect than Covishield. There is a vaccine hesitancy. A lot of people don't want to take vaccine because they think whether vaccine is safe enough, because initially the vaccines were cleared in an emergency authorization mode. So there always a doubt. Then I'm concerned about possible side effect. I do not believe in COVID-19 is dangerous to my health or not. People have mature image that nothing affects me. I reject vaccination of people in principle. A lot of people don't take, including our good friends. And it is best to let it to nature by force. These are different points which are found in one of the study. So basically, we need to tell people to overcome that vaccine hesitancy. Vaccine benefits, it prevents infection by 60 to 80% which vaccine you are taking and at what interval you are taking. It prevents post-COVID syndrome. It prevents formation of newer strains, and it prevents normalization of life and pandemic. So if 99% of the death is prevented by vaccine, 93% of hospitalization or severe illness is prevented by vaccine, and 60 to 80% prevention is there. If at all we can get Sputnik, 91 to 92% protection. So if all things are there, we must take vaccine at our turn. How do we give this to our best choice, virus or vaccine? Choose yours. Healthcare workers to be role models. We should, if we don't take vaccine, how do we convince people? And if we are not taken vaccine, at least somebody in our group, in our staff, in our family knows. So you cannot have a double standard of telling one thing and practicing one thing. Public health messaging, should be tailored and focused to address these concerns. And public-private partnership will be the key aspect to roll out, where the employer can fund vaccination of their staff or their nearby people, and optimizing available facilities and manpower. So vaccinated can be in green zone. Vaccinated with unvaccinated, they can be in gray zone, because a vaccinated person can harbor infection without suffering himself or herself, can pass on the infection to somebody else. But unvaccinated to unvaccinated, totally no. And this RO, last year RO, that is one infected person during the infectivity of 10 days was infecting one person for COVID. This year it was infecting 2 people. Now 1:2 is not double. 1:2 can be 8 times in just 30 days. So one infected person infecting 2 people in 10 days. Next, that 2 people will infect 4, and next 4 people will infect 8. So that means in 30 days, 8 times infection. And that's what we are seeing in several statistics all over the country: 8 times, 10 times, 20 times, 40 times jump in the infections. And the herd immunity can be because of antibodies. Antibodies can be because of our own infection, our own antibodies, or because of the vaccine. Or it will happen that those who are already infected, they have antibodies. Those which are vaccinated, they have antibodies. And if that level goes to 50, 60, 65%, then remaining 35% may not need vaccination. And this is a very much similar to a 2/3 majority rule, or when you are developing your housing society, if 2/3 gives consent, 1/3 doesn't give consent, still you develop society, and all the benefits of developing society are passed on to those 1/3 people who are not given consent. So if exposed to someone in COVID-19, vaccinated person are fully, number one, are fully vaccinated with at least 2 weeks since their final dose, or within 3 months of receiving their final dose, and have remained asymptomatic since the exposure. Health science communication is very important. We all very big doctors, very big scientists, but how we discuss, for example, one of the very senior the so-called COVID specialists said that why people are dying. In an interview, he said people are dying because they are coming late to hospital. So people started going early to hospital. When they go early to hospital, there is no bed. Then you say there's a kiosk there in the hospital, they're not getting bed. You only said people are not going to hospital, they're coming late. So we should be very particular of what we are communicating. So filtering in appropriately wording scientific development in a lay language, foresee repercussions and public frenzy, immediate corrective measures when needed, emotion-based medicine more popular compared to evidence-based medicine. And that's why so many drugs are being run without any popular evidence in medical science. So what is the changes in narrative? Earlier focus was on problem. Now we are focusing on solution and action points. Earlier talking about increasing numbers. Now talk about faces behind the numbers. So there's a German saying, statistics do not make you laugh and figures do not make you cry. It's a human suffering that startles people. So talk about faces. Pull up healthcare workers and health care setting for misdoing. Now, rather than doing that, appreciate assurance for healthcare workers. In pre-HIV era, we had a cleanliness campaign. Topaz Blade, people called me to devise a campaign. And we devised a campaign, they run that campaign everywhere. There were 2 campaigns. One was a positive campaign, one was a negative campaign. Positive campaign, Swachhata Hai Devache Dusre Naam. And they put gods' pictures in different Hindu, Muslim, all gods, and asking people not to urinate here. It didn't work. People still urinated there. We had a negative, another campaign. Ethe Kutre Mutta, we put everywhere. Nobody pissed there. So they realized that they cannot be done. So somehow we have to devise a campaign which will appeal to people. Use fear and encourage people stay at home. But now, other strategies eradicate fear and stigma. Because stigma is a bigger killer than HIV or COVID. So here is our campaign. It is called Darna Nahi, Ladna Hai, Bas Ab Jeetna Hai. And this is my grandchild, 5-year-old. Even he could say himself as a COVID warrior. And this common man statue at a Mumbai promenade, which we put, I wear a mask, I am a corona warrior, are you? And that kind of questioning by a common man, and then Havaldar came, he wanted to also stand there. And this campaign was hit all over the country. Then a lot of times the people think सब फुकट में मिल रहा है, thank to this party, thank to that party, and such a brilliant wording that thank the taxpayer. There is nothing free, no lunches are free. You are thanking the taxpayer because somebody is paying for it. You are not getting anything free. So what I would like to tell at the end, we do not learn from experience. And that's the reason we are repeating the same mistake what Western country has done. We learn from the reflecting on the experience. Let us look at the reflection. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Sorry, I went a little bit overboard. I never realized that it's going to 7:10.
Yeah. Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
You said that so many people were infected in the first wave itself and the antibodies were seen in them. Then why do you call this as the second wave? Can it not be a separate strain which is infecting? The whole first wave is over in the last year only, because it's already more than 12 months now. So should we call this as a second wave, or we should call it as a different infection only because the strain is different?
What happened was people were infected, say from April till maybe October, November. Those who are infected in May, June, or those who are detected as antibody positive in July, they are coming with some infection, but not in big number. So possibly those who were infected at that time, they have been saved this second wave. Second wave is affecting those people who are not infected in the first wave. Another example, in my family, none of us were infected in the first wave. We are a 5 brother, 3 sisters family, 52 of total 52 of them, and 4 of them are in Nagar, Ahmednagar. Out of 52, 27 people are infected in second wave. None of them in the first wave. So, and why I'm saying none of them? I carried antibody test I go to my hometown Latur for Diwali. So I carried antibody test and I tested everybody for antibody. None of them had antibody. Now everybody has antibody out, 27, 28 of them. So basically 40, 50%, 55% people are already infected. If at all there is a shortage of vaccine, I have a suggestion that spare those people who have been infected, who have been antibody positive, who have been RT-PCR positive. Now they can take vaccine after 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. So that other people who have not been infected, who are not antibody positive, who are not RT-PCR positive any time in life, they should be given vaccine. Vijay, you are satisfied?
Yes, I'm satisfied. It was a very intelligent, lucid, and a clear talk, which cleared all our doubts. And your last session concluding, which was more how to give the message. I think, Ishwar, don't take it other way, but you should have been, or rather any field, or in the field of advertising, you can be a very good script writer. Your message, the way you, wanted to pass on the message was excellent. I took undue advantage of your classmateship and said this. Thank you very much anyway. I'm really impressed. And by the way, this was my first time to listen to you.
Thank you.
I want to ask one question. Exactly what is the role of remdesivir and torsemide?
You see, what happens is, there is some cytokine storm happening inside the body. When cytokine storm is happening, when cytokines are going up, because suppose we have an antibody and somebody is attacking us, you are walking, somebody has slapped you. So what you will do, you do 2 slaps. You will not murder that person because your brain tells, "Arey yaar, isne ek mara, chalo 2 maar diya, gira diya, khatam ho gaya." So your response is calibrated. But when this particular virus comes, where we are not known this virus, our response is not calibrated. Suddenly, for X attack, we are putting 100X. Suddenly, 100X means we are having a storm. So what is happening with the storm? That our all lymphocytes are depleted, or PML are increasing. So tomorrow, suppose there is other infection, bacterial, parasitic, we are not able to.
That's what has happened.
Our antibody exhaust is there. Therefore, we need to bring down that antibody attack below. That can be brought fantastically by steroid. And whether you use prednisolone, methylprednisolone, dexamethasone, anything is fine. And same thing is done by tocilizumab. Tocilizumab is also used as an immunomodulator in rheumatoid arthritis. And they are also using here as an immunomodulator. But what happens is it cannot be rule of thumb that you use in everybody. So you need to decide whom we should use. And again, remdesivir has not prevented any death. All studies, including the principal company person, Gilead, their study says that remdesivir doesn't prevent death. It only reduces hospitalization by 1 to 2 days. So it reduces hospitalization. But it gives you satisfaction that for such a big disease, you have given such an important drug. Otherwise, Gar ki murgi dal barabar, steroid works fantastically. Yeah, tell me.
May I ask a question, Prakash?
Sir, is it true that sir, is it true that remdesivir reduces the oxygen requirement or need of oxygen in the patient?
You see, that may be happening. That's what they are giving. But you see, when we want to look at end result of any study or any drug, we have to see prevention of mortality. If suppose it was like a flu, and flu comes and goes, and death rate is 0.1%, we are not bothered. Why we are bothered about this? Because it's 1.5%, 2% death. And therefore, nobody wants to go from 100 to that end result of 1%. Therefore, any drug to be given to reduce that 1% to 0.5% to 0.25%, that is important. Anyway, if your system is augmented, your hospitals are full, and if by giving remdesivir you can reduce somebody's hospitalization by 2 days, which remdesivir cost is 3,000, bed costing 30, 40,000 or 10,000 with whatever government norms are there. So money also is saved and bed is also saved. And that's the reason that remdesivir is given. So by giving remdesivir, possibly oxygen is reduced, requirement is reduced, possibly stay is reduced, possibly cytokine is being taken care of.
But if you consider the 6 doses of remdesivir at 3,000 rupees, then 2 days of stay will not economically doesn't work out the way you said.
Sir, you are in a different town. In Mumbai, there is a hospital here, non-COVID hospital. They keep COVID cases and their rates are very fixed. Simple bed 30,000 per day, ICU bed 50,000 per day, ventilator bed 1 lakh per day. I said, how can you have such a cost? They said, who will calculate how many gloves are required, how many PPEs are required, how many things are required, or blanket cost, 30, 50, 1 lakh. So you can imagine the final stay of 2 days of ventilator is prevented by 2 lakh or 50,000. And secondly, remdesivir procurement cost is less than 1 lakh, 1,000. It's not 3,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vijay.
Yes, it's rather sharing of my own experience. Say when I underwent this COVID disease during the first wave, for first 7 days, I was having little less symptoms, though I was given remdesivir. After remdesivir, I started feeling better. Then on 7th day, the disease exaggerated. My lymphocytes came down to 1%. And when the lymphocytes were 1%, and I was having chills, rigors, fever again. So second lot of remdesivir, another 5 injections were added to my treatment. Then when the lymphocyte count didn't come up, I was given tocilizumabs. The tocilizumab first dose, second dose, third dose. And my oxygen requirements had gone down to 85. Nobody wanted to lose me. Of course, nobody wants anybody to be lost. And I was kept in isolation, ICU, prone, whatnot. I mean, I was tried everything. And after that, I had my left brachial plexitis. That brachial plexitis took away my left shoulder, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, pectoralis major. My flexion, abduction, internal rotation, external rotation of the shoulder, and abduction initiation was all lost. That was again a chance for me to have another 1 month of steroid. After that, I had a severe fungal infection. And then by that time, because of all those vitamin C's, Clexanes, heparins, I got a big superficial thrombophlebitis on my right forearm, which was debrided for first time, second time, third time. And then a plastic surgery was done to heal up the wound. So I have underwent such a huge physical and mental trauma during that period. So I'm inclined to say it's a disease of luck and chances. Luck, whether you survive or not, is just a luck. I mean, treatment, whatever is being done is just an empirical treatment. I mean, excluding steroid, I'm talking. Everything else seems to be empirically given. And with a belief that remdesivir will work, ivermectin will work, hydroxychloroquine will work, because all these drugs, we were thinking that they are immunomodulators. And this disease is a reflection of your immune system. So we all were giving these types of drugs. Steroid also, why it is working? Steroid is working because it is a sort of immunomoderator, I'll say, immunosuppressant. Not moderator, it's a immunosuppressant directly. So we are trying to suppress the immune system of a person. I mean, that is what is my perception as far as COVID is concerned. You all are there. I mean, in fact, Dr. Gilda should, rectify and correct my views or interpretations.
There is a saying in Marathi, "Jacha dalta tyala kalta." So when you have gone through, you know, and therefore medical science is also, even the
And one
chances
more thing I forgot. I had severe bilateral DVT, deep vein thrombosis, for which again I had to take blood thinners for a long period.
Yes. You should have arranged the lecture of Dr. Gilda earlier only. That is the only answer. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, it's
Shiva,
a
you
learning
were
experience.
asking
No, no.
who else is your classmate.
Yes.
Tatya Lahane is my one more classmate at Parli Vajnath. We have studied our FY BSc together.
Okay, okay. Yes.
That was just,
then he failed and he was 1 year behind.
then no, he had to repeat once. He didn't fail, he had to repeat once. So thereby he became our junior by 1 year.
Okay.
And why he repeated?
We will continue now. This is being shown live.
So we'll
Let's
continue
discuss.
the series of calling
No,
Vijay's
we'll
classmate
continue
for
the
lectures.
talk. Yeah.
No,
Yes.
no, sir, live. The show is live as of now. So
Correct. Yes.
if there are no questions, we will stop here and then we can have.
Yeah, but the experience of Dr. Deshpande is what happens when we overtreat the person. It's a classical example. Glad that you have shared this, your own experience. So keeping the treatment minimum is the basic thing. You have to increase your immunity by not taking too many medicines, because all the medicines like antibiotic, whatever additionally we take, they suppress the immunity. So don't take too many medicines till it is required or a doctor advises. Yes, Vijay.
I have one more question. What is your take on mucormycosis, Ishwar? How rampant is it after this?
Recently, some ENT surgeons are sharing their experiences, and they're seeing a lot of cases of mucormycosis. We do not know the percentage, but it is coming in a big way, and amphotericin B works there. So only ENT people can say. We are not seeing any.
We had 5 mucormycosis drained in our hospital last week. We have made a separate COVID OT for that. Mucormycosis last week 5 cases. Seizures, day in and day out, the seizures OT is going on, LSCS. A separate OT is allotted for that now.
Even dental people are
even dental
people are sharing
implants
more
are
cases.
becoming loose. Caries is increasing. Oral fungal infection is increasing.
Now I think with this experience of V.N. Deshpande, we will have one day for these people to express their views on the COVID, because they are real thing, no?
Yeah.
Patient responsive feedback. Patient responsive feedback.
A patient is better than a doctor, experienced patient.
One day this will be there.
President sir, please conclude. Dr. Shinde sir, please conclude.
I request Dr. Shiv Shankar to conclude the session.
Yeah, Shiv Shankar.
Thank you, Dr. Ishwar Gilda sir. It was really nice to listen to you, though we knew you through your work on HIV since long time, but as V.N. Deshpande said, we never had the opportunity to listen to you, and it was a wonderful talk you have given, and you have cleared so many doubts in our mind. Thank you, Dr. V.N. Deshpande, for bringing Dr. Ishwar Gilda to us, and as well as sharing your own experience, which is much more valuable to all the people who are listening. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gilda sir, for joining us and enlightening us on this very important topic. And I am thankful to our IOA President, Dr. Shiv Shankar sir, for joining with us and giving his valuable time. I am thankful to Dr. Vijay Deshpande sir for bringing Gilda sir on the MOA platform and helping people to know more about the drug therapy, what to do and what not to do. I am thankful to our President, Dr. Shinde sir, our Secretary, Dr. Karne sir, and my all executive committee members for giving me this opportunity to conduct this session and to arrange this Foundation Week programs. I am thankful to all the viewers who are seeing this program and all the MOA members who are supporting this MOA Foundation Week activities over a long period of week. So thank you very much, all of you. And with the permission of President Dr. Shinde sir, I declare that this session is over. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chalo, see you.